And what's the key to staying motivated to lift 5 days a week or however many days that you recommend to lift? A lot of people have a hard time, actually sticking to it and keeping that motivation up even after they maybe, initially get started.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, especially, I'm a parent of three now, and I get it much more so than I did 10 years ago, when it was a piece of cake and I wanted to train 3 times a day. So I do understand that can be a challenge. You're busy, you're tired. I would say accountability is very big. If you have a buddy or a group of friends that you meet in the gym or that you strength train with, it's going to counteract some of those off days where you just aren't in the mood, you don't want to do it, but you don't want to let your friends down. So they're there for you when you don't feel the motivation, when you don't feel the desire to push, and you just want to kind of veg out in front of the TV. And then subsequently, when you're feeling good, you're going to motivate them on their down days. So that is very much a beneficial give and take. And research shows actually that people who are more social when they exercise, like racket sports, sports teams, or like buddy sessions at the gym, they have more benefit because social connections are so important for longevity and mental health as well as physical health. So that's my number one tip is make it a social thing. Find accountability partners, try and get your partner at home involved or your kids involved if you want to do sports instead. That can be really, really beneficial.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is going to be from CO. Please state where you're from and ask your question, although I'm having a hard time unmuting them. So let's see, we're going to move to Halal has another question. So Halal, please state your question.
Yes, thank you. My question is about supplementing for vegan athletes with things like L-carnitine, taurine, and creatine. It's very hard to get creatine from non-animal sources. I'm just wondering if you or other vegan bodybuilders are using supplements such as L-carnitine, taurine, or creatine.
Sure, great question. The research that I've seen on carnitine and taurine is very scant. I don't see a lot of benefit there, but I do know carnitine feeds into the TMAO pathway in our gut microbiome. So if we have any kind of deleterious gut microbes, then the amino acid carnitine can actually get them to produce TMAO, which is a molecule that is indicated in cardiovascular disease. So I definitely don't recommend supplementing with carnitine, even though it's supposed to have some fat loss benefits, some body composition benefits. I've not really seen any convincing evidence of that. Taurine, likewise, I know it's in a lot of stimulants, energy drinks, pre-workouts. I've not seen anything convince me that it's necessary. Caffeine is shown to be very beneficial as long as you don't have anxiety or sleep problems. Caffeine early in the day can improve performance. And then creatine, I definitely do supplement myself with creatine before a competition to get ready. I know some vegan bodybuilders do. I know some who are totally whole food, zero supplements. Creatine is, you're right, it's very hard to find outside of animal sources, but even omnivorous athletes and bodybuilders supplement with it because you get very little from animal products and none from plant products. And it's produced in a lab, so it's not an ethical concern. But it is shown to be very safe. They have studies ranging 20, 30 years that show no deleterious effects. I would say that the vast majority of people don't need to supplement, save your money, eat whole foods. It's always the best way to go. But if you're an athlete and you're looking to supplement and to kind of bolster your performance if you can, then the things I've seen that are safest and most convincing are caffeine, like from tea or coffee, and then creatine as well. Hope that answers your question.
So the next question is going to be about jogging and its impact on your knees, your back, your bones. Is jogging safe for us? And if it's not so safe on roads, is it better on grass or dirt?
Great question, and I want to start with the caveat that I'm a little bit of a biased response here because I like weightlifting. I don't particularly enjoy jogging. So, if you talk to a running expert, they might feel very differently than I do. In my time as a personal trainer, I've trained hundreds or possibly thousands of clients, and I have found without exception that my most physically tight, stiff, least flexible are runners, distance runners. So again, that's anecdata. That's not a case study by any means, but I find that running tends to lead to a lot of oftentimes severe muscle tightness and yes, repetitive injury like knees and hips and lower back. That being said, I think there are ways to run that are better. I think a lot of the problem is the shoes people wear. When you wear a typical running shoe that has a lot of support, a big, thick, cushioned heel, it leads to heel striking, which is certainly not optimal. It breaks down your knees, it breaks down your back. And running on a perfectly flat, rock hard surface also, I think, is definitely not the way to go. I'm a very big advocate of minimalist shoes. A quarter of all the joints in your body are in your feet. And so if you're wearing these really supportive, cushy shoes, you're not using any of that structure, any of that musculature that is really, really intricate and really precise. And it's designed to make your body move efficiently over the ground. So I'm very much a fan of running over natural surfaces, trail running, running on the grass, things like that, in barefoot or minimalist shoes, or barefoot completely if you're up for that, if you choose to run. And I think running can be very, very helpful, especially sprinting, like shorter duration, more intense running. I like sprinting up stairs, sprinting up hills, because it's actually easier on the joints. There's less impact when you're going on an incline, and it's harder on the muscles, it's harder on the lungs and heart. So I think there's a lot of benefits to running, but I would particularly be careful of running long distances on paved surfaces in traditional running shoes.
And you mentioned running up an incline. How about running down the hill in order to get back to where you started?
Great question. Generally, it's fine. I wouldn't go all out speed downhill, because uphill decreases your impact, downhill increases it. Your foot falls farther. I would say jogging at a steady, comfortable pace downhill is not a concern unless you have specific, like I have knee problems, then don't do that. But if you're running hill sprints, walking down the hill is a nice way to catch your breath and reset before the next sprint. So it really depends on your goals. If you're just going out for a run, sure, absolutely jog down the hill, run a little harder up the next hill, that's fine. If you're doing sprints that are trying to be all out intensity, I would say just walk down that hill, catch your breath, and that way you're ready to go and you're going to run even faster on your next sprint.
Thank you. So you mentioned runners being stiff. How important is stretching, or can you just do weightlifting without stretching?
That's a great question. And I've actually done a 180 on this topic in the last few years. I'm certified in muscle activation technique through Institute in Denver, Colorado. And it has really opened my eyes on a lot of the neurology involved with muscle contraction and muscle counterbalancing and centration of joints. Stretching, especially long static stretching prior to exercise, can destabilize your joints. So I think stretching can be very beneficial, particularly if you do it away from some exercises. But I'm very much in favor of dynamic mobility work before training. So arm swings, arm circles, side lunges, things that get your joints moving through a range of motion dynamically, I think are a great way to warm up for exercise and a great way to make sure you have that range of motion. And in terms of the research, strength training has actually been shown to be just as beneficial for improving your flexibility as a designated static stretching program if you're using a full range of motion. So if you have one group of people and you take them and say, okay, you're going to do 20 minutes of static stretching 5 days a week, and you have the other group and say, okay, you're going to do strength training 5 days a week. At the end of the study, both people have improved their flexibility equally, but the people strength training got much stronger and built more muscle and all this other stuff too. So while I don't think you have to stretch at all to be healthy and improve your flexibility, I like to do some dynamic work before strength training with all my clients and with myself, because I feel like it's going to help you have better form and warm up your tissues a little better.
What about bone strength, avoiding osteoporosis? You mentioned weightlifting helping in that regard. What about things like walking, yoga? Does that help with bone strength as well?
Great question. And this is very much a concern once you hit the age 65 and over, particularly with postmenopausal women. Bone density is absolutely essential for long-term health. You need strong bones. So strength training is the best way to improve your bone density in terms of exercises. Anything with any sort of impact, though, can be very good. I would say something like yoga or swimming that has no impact, cycling also, is not going to be very beneficial. But it also is relative to where you're beginning. If you're starting from being sedentary, then any sort of loading you put on your structure at all is going to improve that bone density. So if you don't walk, then starting to walk is going to be a great thing to do. If you don't do yoga, starting yoga is going to be a great thing. But the most efficient thing you can do for improving your bone density is strength training with an external load. So I definitely recommend everyone do that because it does get very important as time passes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our next question is coming from Steve. Steve, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, Steve from New York. Glad to hear you use tofu in your program. Apparently, there's a lot of concern in the weightlifting community about phytoestrogens from flax and tofu. What's your response to those things about that they lower testosterone and therefore affect the ability of putting on muscle? That's the question.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. This is one I've actually answered this question many times, and I kind of chuckle to myself because my first response if an omnivore asks me that question is, do you know how much estrogen is in dairy products? Because they invariably say, I didn't think there was any. And it turns out it's orders of magnitude higher than the levels that are in plant foods like flax and soy. And it's not a phytosterol, it's bovine estrogen. And you can guess which one has a larger impact on humans. So that's my first response is people eating dairy products are having way more estrogen and way stronger estrogen than anyone eating soy. And the second question is looking at the research. People who eat soy have no impact on their testosterone levels. It's in the literature, so all they have to do is read it. They also have lower risk of reproductive cancers. So that's breast and ovarian and cervical cancer in women, and that's prostate cancer and testicular cancer in men. When you eat these phytosterols, it moderates your own hormones and lowers the risk of hormone-mediated cancers. Also in men, it can prevent male pattern baldness, which is nice. So I think these sterols are very much a good thing. They're also shown to moderate the levels or moderate some of the discomforts and the symptoms involved with menopause. They have a lot of health benefits, and I think we should probably all be eating more phytosteroids or sterols than we currently do. I don't worry about it at all. I eat tofu and soy on a regular basis, and I encourage everyone else to as well, unless they have an allergy.
Okay, what nutritional supplements do you recommend for everyday people that want to be strong and healthy?
Great question. There's two categories of supplements that we could talk about. One is performance and one is just everyday wellness. So it sounds like nutritional is the everyday wellness category. You really don't need much aside from as a plant-based eater, aside from B12 and maybe vitamin D. The vast majority of people don't get outside enough. And so vitamin D becomes essential when you're not getting that sunlight. And then B12 is just, our food is triple washed and packaged. And if you eat animal products, it's treated with 15,000 pounds of antibiotics. So people aren't consuming bacteria like we did when we were natural wild creatures. And so supplementing with B12 makes sense whether you're a vegan or an omnivore. I will say in the winter months when we're getting less produce, less fresh produce, I should say, and it's flu and cold season, I do supplement my family with a multivitamin. I try to get the most naturally sourced one. But that's for about 3 months of the year. And the rest of the time we eat lots and lots of fresh produce. We get lots of sunshine and I don't worry about it. Wellness supplements, that's really my only recommendation is maybe the B12 and the vitamin D. Other than that, eat lots of fruits and vegetables and you should be fine. We're going to do 2 more questions if that's all right, Michael.
That's great. Jay, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, Jay. I'm from UK, Birmingham in the UK, yeah. What I want to know is I'm in my late 50s. I'm started resistance training, and I've read that beans and lentils are a good source of protein. But on the other hand, there's a lot of carbs in these items, and I'm trying to lose weight as well. So what would you be recommending for protein along those lines?
Sure. Hey, Jay, great question. Yes, the thing about whole plant foods in particular is they're a complete food. So in whole plants, you're going to have protein, you're going to have carbs, and you're going to have fats, and you're going to have fiber and nutrients as well. It's not so much like animal products where here's something that's just fat, here's something that's just protein, and it's much more compartmentalized. So it is not a bad thing at all that those legumes have carbs. Carbs are actually beneficial for keeping you satisfied and for fueling your exercise and recovery. If your goal is weight loss, just eating a healthy diet and getting exercise, if those are not things you've been doing, that should be enough to elicit a change. So everything you do is relative to what your body is used to doing. If you're not used to eating a lot of high fiber whole plant foods and you're not used to strength training, you should see a lot of benefit from making those 2 changes. If you're not, then maybe considering your calorie intake, because carbs in and of themselves don't cause weight gain. It's overeating, it's over consuming calories. And yes, eating a low carb diet works because people who eat low carb diets are cutting their calories. The same thing can be said of a low fat diet. You cut out fat, a lot of times people are dropping their caloric intake. So if you're eating lots of whole plant foods, the good news is there's lots of fiber, there's lots of bulk, you get full faster. So you will probably naturally be reducing your calories. So that combined with exercise, I think you'll do fine. If you want to up your protein a little bit, focus on the more protein dense foods like tofu and tempeh. And that may help a little bit as well.
Okay. And last question, calcium supplements. What are your thoughts about with calcium supplements with regard to heart health?
Sure. This is not something I know a ton about, so I'm going to have that little caveat in there. With calcium supplements, I do know that absorption is a big concern. To properly absorb calcium, you need to have adequate levels of vitamin D and I believe vitamin K. And you also want to make sure that you're not eating things that are inhibiting mineral absorption. And specifically to that, that's oftentimes tea and coffee can inhibit mineral absorption. I'm not sure if this is talking about like calcification of blood vessels or things like that, or calcium mediated muscle contraction. So I'm not positive, but in any case, things that improve calcium absorption from your food or a supplement are like natural acids, vitamin C, like citric acid from citrus, vinegar. Those things are going to improve absorption. Coffees and teas can actually inhibit it. So you don't want to eat these foods or supplements around there. And just make sure you're getting a diet that's rich in especially leafy green vegetables and whole grains. Those are typically the best source of minerals, including calcium. You shouldn't need to supplement unless your doctor says so. But if there's a specific problem and you have concerns, I would see a doctor or a registered dietitian to determine what the best course of action is there.
Thank you. And if I may, just one quick thing on tea. Is it just the tea from like the tea tree, or is it like herbal teas as well when you say tea?
Sure. It is tea from the tea tree. That specific plant can inhibit mineral absorption, and that's any mineral: iron, magnesium, calcium. So if you are worried about your mineral levels, you probably want to space out. Tea is a very, very healthy beverage, but maybe don't have it with your meals so that you can get the most of both benefits.
Thank you so much, Derek. Please unmute the audience, and we greatly appreciate this whole
cranberry.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah. The cranberry nut. Yep. Oh, that's healthy, right?
Thank you everyone for coming. It was a pleasure.